We must tear away the comfortable shroud of history. When we look at Giza, we imagine slaves perishing under the whip, a nightmare of tyranny. This is a lie. The reality was not slavery, but a sophisticated paid hell, where men were fed prime meat and organized with military precision, not for mercy, but to fuel a human machine. They were not bound by chains, but by a terrifying spiritual duty, voluntarily trading their lives stone by stone for a promise of eternity they would never see. The sun has not yet breached the eastern horizon, and the world is suspended in that heavy, suffocating hour between night and morning, a time when the desert is deceptively cool. The air is thick, carrying the moisture of the nearby Nile mixed with the eternal, dry dust of the Sahara. The workers' village lies in a temporary state of dormancy, a sprawling grid of mud brick galleries that house the rotating workforce. Inside these barracks, the atmosphere is thick enough to choke a man unaccustomed to it. The air is stagnant, heavy with the smell of unwashed bodies packed closely together, the sour tang of stale beer, the lingering smoke of dung fires used for heating, and the pervasive metallic scent of dried mud and limestone dust. Dozens of men lie side by side on woven reed mats, their bodies curled against the lingering chill of the desert night, creating a scene devoid of rattling chains but filled with the rhythmic, heavy breathing of exhausted men. It is a low, collective hum, a vibration of humanity recovering from yesterday's toil to survive today's demands. In the darkness, if one were to look closely with a lamp, the toll of the work on their bodies becomes visibly horrific. These are not the frail skeletons of the slave myth. These are robust men, heavily muscled, their frames thickened by protein and unrelenting labor. But they are damaged goods. Even in sleep, their faces are etched with grimaces of pain. Spines are compressed from bearing impossible loads, vertebrae grinding together. Joints are swollen, knees swollen to the size of melons, grinding against cartilage that has worn thin before its time. We see a hand twitching in sleep, fingers permanently curled as if gripping a rough palm fiber rope that isn't there. We see scars, not from whips, but from the rough kiss of limestone and granite, abrasions that never fully heal because the dust constantly irritates them. A crushed toe healing badly, a shoulder bruised deep purple from the pressure of a wooden lever. They sleep deeply, a narcotic slumber induced by absolute physical depletion. The silence of the barracks is not peaceful. It is heavy. It is the silence of a machine turned off for maintenance, waiting for the switch to be flipped again. The signal to rise comes not with a trumpet or a shout, but with the subtle shift in light and the movements of the overseers who walk the perimeter. The awakening is a ripple effect, a slow wave of consciousness returning to a broken army. One by one, the men stir. There is a universal reluctance in their movements, a hesitation to accept that the rest is over. Eyes open to stare at the thatched roofs, the realization of where they are sinking in like a stone in water. The ache in the lower back is the first greeting of the day, a dull throb that will sharpen into a knife point of pain as soon as they stand. The stiffness in the legs is the second greeting. They rise from the mats, groaning softly, feet touching the packed earth floor that is cool against their skin. In the dim light of oil lamps and the faint gray of the coming dawn, the barracks transform into a hive of low-energy activity. There is no idle chatter here. There is no laughter, no telling of jokes. These men are saving their breath. Every calorie is precious. To speak is to waste energy that will be needed to move a mountain. They move with the economy of veterans who know the drill. They dress in simple linen shendits, short kilts wrapped around the waist, the fabric rough and stained beige with the dust of the plateau. Some wrap strips of cloth around their shins or wrists, makeshift supports for the strain to come, binding their joints in hopes of holding them together for one more day. Sandals are tightened, thick leather soles designed to withstand the scorching heat of the sand and the sharp, flinty debris of the construction site. A young worker, perhaps no older than 20 but looking 40, splashes water from a communal jar onto his face. The water is cool, drawn from the canals that bleed from the Nile, but it fails to wash away the deep-seated fatigue in his eyes. He looks at his hands. They are calloused, the skin hard as leather, stained with the red ochre of the quarry and the white dust of Tura. He knows he is not an individual. He is a MBA, a laborer, a limb of the gang known as a Za. His identity is dissolved into this group. If he falls, the group slows. If he fails, the group suffers. Before the work can begin, the human engine must be fueled. The men shuffle out of the sleeping galleries into the open courtyards where the smoke of cooking fires already hangs low in the air, creating a haze that stings the eyes. The logistical prowess of the Egyptian administration is on full display here, a marvel of organization that predates the Roman legions by thousands of years. This is not a haphazard distribution of scraps. It is a calculated caloric injection designed by royal physicians and scribes. Huge ceramic vats sit in rows, monitored by officials who hold the power of life and death in their stylus pens. The smell is overpowering, a mix of fermenting yeast, roasting meat, onions, and garlic. The scribes stand ready, clay tablets in hand, marking off the rations for each gang. The drunkards of Menkaure, the friends of Khufu, the names of the gangs are called out. Every loaf of bread is accounted for. Every jar of beer is tallied. This is the wage. This is the payment that separates them from the slaves of legend, yet binds them just as tightly. The bread is dense, coarse, emmer wheat ground by stones that leave grit in the flour, grit that will slowly grind their teeth down to the gums over the years. But it is filling. The beer is thick, low in alcohol but rich in nutrients, a gruel-like substance that serves as both food and hydration, essential in a land where water can carry sickness. They receive onions and garlic, believed to cleanse the blood and ward off the plagues that fester in cramped quarters. And for the heavy lifters, the stone haulers, there are portions of dried fish and even beef, a luxury unknown to the common peasant, but a necessity for the heavy machinery of the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh knows, you cannot build a mountain on grain alone. You need muscle, and muscle needs meat. They eat quickly, squatting in the dust or standing in small circles, protecting their food from the wind. They consume the food not for pleasure, but for function. They are fueling the furnace. The beer washes down the dry bread. The protein repairs the micro-tears in their muscles from the previous day's exertion. It is a solemn ritual. As they eat, eyes inevitably look towards the west. To the west, the plateau rises above the floodplain, a stark shelf of rock against the sky, and there, dominating the skyline, is the Great Project. Even in the half-light, it is monstrous. It is not yet the perfect, smooth pyramid we see in diagrams. It is a jagged mountain of yellow limestone, a stepped beast rising layer by layer, surrounded by a chaotic halo of wooden scaffolding, ramps, and dust. The top is flat, a construction platform teeming with wooden cranes and waiting for the next course of stones. It casts a shadow that seems to stretch across the entire world. It is the Ake Khufu, the horizon of Khufu. It is the center of gravity for every life in this village. It is the reason they were born, and it is likely the reason they will die. The sight of it inspires a complex duality of emotion in the workers. On one hand, there is dread, a deep, visceral dread. They know the weight of the stones. They know the heat that radiates from the white casing blocks at midday, blinding and scorching. They know the sheer, mind-numbing repetition of the task. But on the other hand, there is awe. They are building a ladder to the stars. They are securing the immortality of the king, and by extension, the stability of the cosmos. This belief is the invisible whip. It is stronger than leather. It compels them to finish their meal, to wipe their mouths, and to form up into their gangs. The sun begins to bleed over the horizon, turning the sky a bruised purple and then a harsh, unforgiving gold. The temperature begins its climb. In an hour, it will be hot. In 3 hours, it will be unbearable. The gangs assemble. They are organized into larger groups known as fills, the Great, the Asiatic, the Green, the The march from the workers' village to the Giza plateau is a daily migration, a river of humanity flowing uphill towards the seat of power, and as they ascend, the nature of the world around them changes. The soft, fertile mud of the Nile Valley, that life-giving black earth that smells of growth and decay, is left behind, replaced by a landscape of stark, unforgiving geology. They are entering the realm of stone, a world stripped of softness, where the ground beneath their sandals is no longer yielding earth, but the hard, calcified skeleton of the planet itself. This is the domain of the quarryman, the place where the pyramid begins not as architecture, but as raw geology waiting to be violently torn from its bedrock womb. The air here is different. It is thinner, sharper, tasting of chalk and ancient dust that coats the back of the throat and turns saliva into a gritty paste. The sun, now fully risen, does not warm this place. It assaults it, its rays reflecting off the white limestone faces of the cliffs with blinding intensity, creating an oven where the heat is trapped and magnified by the surrounding rock walls. We are in the main quarry, located just to the south of the Great Pyramid, a colossal open wound in the plateau where generations of men have hacked away at the Earth's flesh. The scale of the operation is staggering, a man-made canyon where the terraced walls rise high above, marked with the telltale grooves of thousands of copper chisels, the scars of a slow, agonizing battle against matter. The noise is the first thing that hits you, a deafening, relentless cacophony that drowns out thought and speech, a symphony of destruction composed of metal striking stone, wooden mallets striking metal, and the grunts of men pushing their bodies beyond their breaking point. It is a sound that never stops, a rhythmic industrial heartbeat that pulses from dawn until dusk, echoing off the canyon walls until it becomes a physical pressure in the ears. The men working here are the elite of the labor force, the stonecutters, whose bodies have been shaped by years of this specific torture. Their shoulders are masses of dense, fibrous muscle, developed from the endless swing of the mallet. Their hands are no longer unrecognizable as human appendages, transformed into gnarled claws of callus and scar tissue, permanently molded to the shape of a chisel handle. They work in gangs, organized with the same military precision as the haulers, each man a cog in a machine designed to dismantle a mountain. They are covered in a thick layer of white dust, ghosts moving in the blinding light, their sweat streaking through the powder, turning them into living statues of chalk. They wear almost nothing, perhaps a simple loincloth, their skin burned to the color of dark leather by the sun, protected only by the layers of dust and their own hard-earned resilience. The process of extracting a block is a study in patience and brute force, a testament to what human muscle can achieve when it has no other choice. It begins with the scribe of the quarry, an official who marks out the dimensions of the intended block on the bedrock floor using red ochre paint and taut strings. Once the lines are drawn, the cutters move in. They do not have iron. They do not have steel. Their tools are made of copper, a metal far softer than the limestone they are attacking, which means the battle is one of attrition. The primary tool is a thick, heavy copper chisel, held in one hand, while the other swings a heavy, bulbous wooden mallet crafted from hard acacia wood. The worker places the chisel tip against the rock surface and strikes. Clack. A tiny shower of white dust and rock chips. To cut a trench deep enough to isolate a block can take days of this relentless pounding. The copper tips blunt quickly against the hard limestone, requiring constant sharpening. A train of young boys, the runners, scurry back and forth between the workfaces and the smithy tent, carrying armfuls of dull chisels to be annealed in fire and hammered back into a cutting edge, and returning with sharp ones. The smithy is a vision of hell within this white landscape, a shaded area where fires burn hot, the air thick with the smell of charcoal and molten metal, where smiths sweat over anvils, their hammers ringing a countermelody to the quarry's song. They are the pit crew for this engine of destruction, ensuring the tools of extraction never fail. The cutters work in narrow channels carved around the nascent block, trenches just wide enough for a man to stand sideways. The heat in these trenches is unimaginable. The rock absorbs the sun's energy and radiates it back, creating a convection oven where temperatures can soar past 50 degrees Celsius. The air is still and choked with fine powder that hangs like fog, coating the lungs with every breath, a slow accumulation of stone inside the body that will eventually kill many of them with a racking, bloody cough known as the stonecutter sickness. Yet they do not stop. They work in a rhythm, a trance-like state induced by the repetition and the heat. Clack, shift, clack, shift. They are not thinking about the grandeur of the Pharaoh's tomb. They are thinking about the next blow, the angle of the chisel, the resistance of the stone. They are thinking about the water jar sitting in the shade, the promise of a brief respite when the sun reaches its zenith. When the trenches around the block are deep enough, a new team moves in for the most delicate and dangerous part of the operation, detaching the block from the bedrock floor beneath it. This is done not by cutting, but by cleaving. Workers, often lying flat on their bellies in the suffocating dust of the narrow trenches, carefully hammer dry wooden wedges made of sycamore into the natural bedding planes of the limestone at the base of the block. These wedges are placed with surgical precision, exploiting the stone's inherent weaknesses. Once a series of wedges are set along the entire base, the water carriers arrive. They pour water onto the dry wood, and then they wait. The waiting is the only quiet time in the quarry. The men stand back, watching, listening. As the dry wood absorbs the water, it begins to swell. The expansion creates an immense, silent hydraulic pressure within the stone's grain. It is a slow, natural force, more powerful than any hammer blow. The men listen for the sound. A deep, resonant crack that starts as a low groan from deep within the earth, then suddenly snaps sharp and loud like thunder trapped in rock. The block shudders. A hairline fracture appears along the base, running from wedge to wedge. The mountain has been broken. The flesh of the earth has been severed. But the birth of the stone is violent. A 2-ton block doesn't just sit there. It settles, it shifts. If the cut isn't perfect, if the weight distribution is wrong, the block can lurch unpredictably. This is the moment of greatest danger. Many a quarryman has been crushed instantly by a shifting block, his body becoming just another layer in the geological history of the plateau. There are no funerals here, no pauses for mourning. If a man dies, he is dragged clear, his body taken back to the village for a swift burial in the desert sand, and another man, perhaps his brother or son, steps into his place, picking up the fallen mallet, his grief swallowed by the necessity of the work. The quota must be met. The king's horizon must rise. Once detached, the block is a raw, rough thing, a brutal cube of geology. Now come the masons with their adzes and polishing stones, actively shaping the block right there in the quarry pit. They trim the rough edges, squaring the faces, preparing it for its journey. The sound changes here, from the deep clack of the chisel to the scraping, grinding shriek of stone on stone. They work with amazing speed, their eyes judging right angles without the need for tools, their hands knowing the exact pressure needed to shave off a layer of rock without cracking the whole stone. They are sculptors of industrial quantities, turning chaos into order. This is the reality of the quarry, a place of blinding light, suffocating heat, and deafening noise, where human beings are reduced to components in a geological extraction process. Their lungs fill with dust, their joints fuse with arthritis, their hearing is destroyed by the constant hammering, and their bodies are burned black by the sun. Yet, like the haulers, they are not slaves held by chains. They are held by the complex web of duty, religious belief, and the economic necessity of the rations that feed their families back in the village. They are tearing down a mountain to build an artificial one, trading their own flesh to harvest the flesh of the earth in a transaction where the currency is sweat, pain, and a deeply ingrained, terrifying faith in the necessity of their own sacrifice. The stone has been severed from the mountain, a newborn block of limestone sitting heavy and inert on the bedrock floor. But a stone in a quarry is useless. It is merely debris until it reaches the pyramid. To move a mountain, one cannot rely solely on the backs of men or the friction of sledges over sand, for the distances are too great and the weight too punishing. Instead, the builders turn to the only force in Egypt powerful enough to rival the sun, the Nile. If the plateau is the anvil where the project is forged, the river is the conveyor belt, the liquid spine that supports the entire impossible anatomy of the construction. But the transition from the solid, predictable element of earth to the fluid, chaotic element of water represents one of the most dangerous phases of the entire operation. We leave the white dust of the quarry behind and descend toward the floodplain, where the air grows heavy, thick with humidity and the smell of wet earth, rotting vegetation, and the teeming life of the river. We find ourselves now on the eastern bank, at the great quarries of Tura. Here, the stone is different. It is not the rough, yellow nummulitic limestone of the Giza core, but a fine, snow-white stone, dense and smooth, intended for the outer casing of the pyramid. These blocks are the skin of the god-king's monument, and they must be treated with even greater care, yet they must cross the wide, turbulent expanse of the river during the season of the inundation. The Ake, the flood, is not a disaster for these men. It is a tool, a divinely timed mechanism that brings the water level up to the foot of the desert cliffs, allowing ships to dock right at the quarry's mouth. The harbor is a chaotic masterpiece of naval engineering. Hundreds of vessels crowd the water, slender papyrus skiffs darting between massive cedar barges imported from Lebanon, heavy transport rafts, and military patrol boats. The noise here is different from the quarry. It is the creaking of timber, the slapping of water against hulls, the shouting of boat captains, and the roar of the wind in the rigging. But the true marvel is the loading process, a feat of physics that predates Archimedes by millennia. The Egyptians understand the principle of buoyancy, that water pushes back against what pushes down on it, and they exploit this with terrifying precision. We witness the loading of a sek, a heavy transport barge. It is not done by lifting the stone into the boat, for no crane exists that could hoist a 10-ton casing block high enough. Instead, they bring the boat to the stone. The barge is maneuvered into a specifically dug slipway, a narrow canal perpendicular to the river. The water in the slipway is controlled by sluice gates. The workers, standing waist-deep in the muddy water, guide the massive wooden vessel until it sits directly above a submerged platform where the stone has already been dragged during low water, or conversely, they sink the barge intentionally. By weighting the barge with ballast stones, they lower its deck until it is flush with the quay. It is a game of millimeters. The stone is then levered and rolled onto the deck. Then the ballast is removed stone by stone. As the weight decreases, the water fights back, lifting the barge and its massive cargo. The stone effectively becomes weightless, borne by the river's shoulders. But there is another, more ingenious method used for the trickier, shallower waters, the science of inflated skins. We see gangs of men working with piles of goat and sheep skins, sewn tight and sealed with pitch. They inflate them, not with pumps, but with their own lungs, dizzying work that leaves them lightheaded. These skins are not toys. They are industrial pontoons. When lashed together in the hundreds beneath a wooden raft or attached directly to a semi-submerged stone, they provide immense lift. A 2-ton block of rock, when married to enough air, defies gravity. Bobs on the surface, transformed from an immovable object into a compliant vessel. This technique allows them to navigate the shallower man-made canals where a deep-draft barge would run aground. The journey across the Nile is a slow, tense ballet. The current is strong, swollen with the floodwaters rushing from the heart of Africa. The boatmen must fight the river's desire to sweep them north to the Mediterranean. They use long steering oars, their muscles straining against the torque of the water. This is not a peaceful cruise. It is a high-stakes wrestling match with a god. Happy, the river god, is generous but capricious. A sudden shift in the current, a hidden sandbar, or a collision with another raft could spell disaster. If a stone shifts, the raft capsizes. There are no life vests. The water is murky, concealing crocodiles that patrol the edges of the construction traffic, waiting for the careless or the unlucky. We see the eyes of the boatmen scanning the water, not just for navigation, but for the ripple of a predator. The atmosphere on the river is suffocatingly hot, but wet. The sweat does not dry. It clings to the skin, mixing with the spray of the river. Flies swarm around the eyes and mouths of the rowers. The smell is intense. The metallic tang of the water, the scent of cedar wood heating in the sun, and the sweat of thousands. Yet, there is a rhythm here that is absent in the quarry. The rowers chant, a low, guttural song that keeps the oars moving in unison. Heave pull, heave pull. The rope bites into their hands, wet and slippery. They are the arteries of the project, pumping the blood, the stone, from the source to the heart. As the heavy barges approach the western bank, the Giza Plateau looms ahead, reflected in the floodwaters. From this angle, the pyramid looks like it is rising directly out of the ocean, a primeval mound emerging from chaos. The paid hell continues here, but the element has changed. The workers are not choking on dust. They are rotting in the damp. Their feet are constantly wet, the skin pruning and cracking, prone to fungal infections that eat away at the flesh between the toes. This is the price of the river's gift. The Nile carries the stone, but it demands a toll in human suffering. The docking at the Giza harbor is a reverse of the loading. The barges are guided into the complex network of artificial basins dug at the foot of the plateau. Here, the water is calm, tamed by massive dikes and walls. The water of the mountain, as they call the harbor, is the transfer point. The stone must now leave the grace of the water and return to the cruelty of the earth. We see the transition, the heavy thud as the block is levered off the deck and onto the sledge. The buoyancy is gone. The weight returns instantly, crushing down on the wooden rollers, demanding once again the brute force of the haulers. The river has done its part. It has carried the pieces of eternity across the divide of the living and the dead. Now the mud awaits. The Nile is a wild god, a force of nature that floods and recedes at its own whim. But the engineers of Khufu cannot rely on the whims of a god to build a mountain. They need consistency. They need control. And so, as the barges leave the open water of the great river, they enter a world where nature has been beaten into submission by geometry. We are entering the Roshi Khufu, the mouth of the Lake of Khufu, the massive central harbor complex that serves as the throat of the construction site. This is not merely a place to dock. It is a hydraulic machine, a vast, stagnant lung that breathes in stone and exhales empty boats. The transition is jarring. The cool breeze of the open river dies instantly, replaced by the heavy, humid stillness of enclosed water. The current stops. The silence of the drift is replaced by the roar of concentrated industry. We are now navigating the artificial arteries of Giza. These canals are not natural tributaries. They are deep, straight gashes cut into the floodplain, lined with packed clay and stone to prevent collapse. They are the result of years of dredging, a separate monumental labor that preceded the pyramid itself. Thousands of men spend their lives waist-deep in this mud, constantly clearing the silt that threatens to choke the waterways, fighting an endless war against the sediment of Africa. The water here is dark, opaque with stirred-up mud and the waste of the city that sits upon its banks. It smells of wet limestone, rotting wood, and the latrines of 20,000 workers. It is a functional, ugly water, stripped of its romance and harnessed solely for logistics. The harbor is a study in controlled chaos. It is a traffic jam of history. Barges carrying fine white limestone from Turajasal for space with rafts carrying pink granite from Aswan, hundreds of miles to the south. Other boats carry grain, beer, dried fish, and timber. It is a floating city of supplies, a bottleneck where the resources of an entire nation are funneled into a single point. The harbor masters stand on high wooden platforms, shouting orders through cupped hands, their voices straining over the din. They are the conductors of this aquatic orchestra, directing traffic with a complex system of flags and runners. A mistake here, a blocked canal or a sunken barge, causes a ripple effect that slows work on the pyramid itself. Efficiency is the only god worshipped in this harbor. We witness the mechanism of the locks. While not the complex lock gates of the modern era, The Egyptians utilize a system of removable stone barriers and earthen dams to control water levels in different sections of the canal network. We see a team of workers, the water watchers, straining against wooden winches to lift a heavy cedar gate. Water rushes through with a roar, equalizing the level between the main basin and a delivery slipway. It is a display of hydraulic mastery. They are manipulating the blood of the Nile, forcing it to lift their burdens higher up the plateau than nature intended. This engineering allows the stones to be floated almost to the base of the construction ramp, saving miles of brutal dragging. It is the ultimate cheat against gravity. But the journey through these narrow artificial rivers is treacherous for the boatmen. There is no room for error. The barges are poled along, not rowed, as the canals are too narrow for oars. Men stand on the gunwales, driving long poles into the muddy bottom, pushing with their entire body weight. Their muscles burn. Their feet slip on the wet wood. The walls of the canal loom high on either side, blocking out the view of the desert, creating a tunnel of water and mud. The heat is stifling here, trapped between the canal banks. Clouds of mosquitoes, bred in the stagnant pockets of water, torment the workers, a plague that no amount of royal decree can banish. We see men slapping their necks, their backs, their faces, cursing the insects even as they lean into the poles. Malaria is a silent killer here, a ghost that stalks the waterways. As the barges reach the delivery quays, the final transfer begins. This is the zone of friction. The water ends here. The easy ride is over. We see the reception gangs waiting on the muddy banks. They are different from the boatmen. They are built for leverage, not balance. The barge thuds against the wooden piles of the dock. Ropes are thrown. The vessel is lashed tight, groaning against its restraints. Now comes the critical moment of unloading. There are no cranes to pluck the blocks from the decks. Instead, the deck of the barge is lined up with a mud brick ramp. The stone must be dragged horizontally. This is a moment of extreme danger. The transition from a floating surface to a solid one is unstable. As the 10-ton block moves, the boat shifts, rises, and tilts. If it tilts too far, the stone slides uncontrollably, crushing legs, snapping spines, or smashing through the hull of the boat, sending the precious cargo to the bottom of the muddy canal. We see the foreman of the transfer watching closely, his eyes locked on the waterline. He signals with a sharp hand movement. The haulers on the shore pull. The levermen on the boat push. The stone grinds over the threshold. Grind, thud. It is on land. The block is now sitting on the delivery sledge, a heavy wooden sled made of Lebanese cedar, runners curved at the front like the prow of a ship. It is no longer a cargo. It is a burden. The buoyancy of the water is a memory. The full, crushing weight of the geology returns. The workers can feel it in the ground. The earth vibrates slightly when the stone lands. The artificial river has done its job. It has brought the mountain to the foot of the ramp. Now the water recedes into the background, and the reality of friction takes over. The mud of the harbor bank is churned into a paste by thousands of feet. This is the staging ground, the marshalling yard where the stones are inspected, tallied by scribes who mark them with black ink. Starboard side, year of the cattle count, gang of the drunkards. From here, the only way is up. The canals lie behind them, flat and reflecting the sky, indifferent to the suffering on the shore. The workers look from the dark water to the bright, blinding slope of the ramp that awaits them. The gift of the Nile has been delivered. Now begins the tax of the earth. We have left the water behind. The mud of the harbor has dried on the skin, flaking off to reveal the sunburned flesh beneath. Now the true test of gravity begins. We stand at the base of the Great Pyramid, but it does not look like the smooth, triangular geometric perfection of modern postcards. It is a chaotic, stepped mountain, a beast under construction, surrounded by a hive of activity that defies the eyes. And the key to this beast, the only way to feed its insatiable hunger for stone, is the road that hugs its sides. We are looking at the spiral serpent, a marvel of engineering born of necessity. A straight ramp would need to be a mile long to reach the top with a manageable slope, a volume of material rivaling the pyramid itself. The architects of Khufu are too smart for such waste. Instead, they have curled the road around the structure, a corkscrew path that clings to the rising edifice like a constrictor snake squeezing its prey. This ramp is a living thing. It is not built of solid stone like the pyramid, but of rubble, limestone chips, gypsum, and the omnipresent Nile mud, pounded into a surface as hard as concrete. As the pyramid rises, the ramp rises with it, a parasitic structure that grows layer by layer. It is narrow, terrifyingly so. On one side is the solid, reassuring mass of the limestone core blocks, cool to the touch. On the other side is the drop, a sheer fall into the construction yards below, where men look like ants and oxen look like beetles. There are no guardrails here, only a low ridge of dried mud. One stumble, one moment of vertigo, one shift of a block, and a man becomes a gruesome stain on the stones far below. The wind here is different. It does not rustle. It howls unimpeded by the desert floor, tearing at the workers' linen kilts and throwing dust into their eyes. We begin the ascent. The slope is calculated with mathematical cruelty, roughly 7 degrees. It is steep enough to make every step a battle, but shallow enough that the physics of the haul are just barely possible. The surface of the ramp is not just dirt. It is an engineered roadway, embedded with transverse beams of timber, wooden sleepers laid like railroad tracks. These timbers are there to hold the friction, to give the runners of the sledges something to bite into, preventing the heavy loads from sliding backward into the teams behind them. The most critical and dangerous feature of this spiral path is the corner. A sledge cannot turn on a curve. It is a rigid vehicle carrying a rigid stone. Therefore, the corners of the pyramid are left open, flat platforms where the ramp levels out. Here, the spiral serpent pauses. We witness the maneuvering of a 2-ton block at the southeast corner, 50 meters in the air. The team must stop. The momentum they have fought so hard to build must be killed. They cannot simply turn the sledge. They must rotate it. This is a scene of high-tension mechanics. Wooden levers, thick as tree trunks, are jammed under the sledge. Pivot stones, hard, rounded dolerite balls, are placed beneath the center of gravity. With a coordinated shout that echoes over the plateau, 20 men push sideways. The block groans, a sound of grinding tectonic plates. It spins 90 degrees on its axis, aiming for the next face of the pyramid, the next leg of the spiral. If the lever snaps, the men holding it will be broken. If the block spins too far, it could tip off the edge, taking the team with it. The corner is where the SW&W, the doctors, wait with their bandages and splints. It is the ambush point of the construction site. As we climb higher, the atmosphere changes psychologically. The connection to the earth is severed. The workers here are no longer creatures of the soil. They are creatures of the sky. The air is thinner, cooler, but the sun is more vicious, reflecting off the white limestone casing that has already been polished on the lower levels. The glare is blinding. Many of the older workers suffer from snow blindness caused by the white stone, their eyes chronically red and weeping. The view from the ramp is a God's eye view, but the workers do not look at it. To look down is to invite fear. They look only at the heels of the man in front of them, or at the ropes that bind them to the stone. Yet the presence of the height is undeniable. The sounds of the harbor, the shouting boatmen, the creaking wood have faded into a distant murmur. Up here, the dominant sound is the wind and the rhythmic chanting of the haulers, a mantra of survival. This spiral road is a logistical nightmare. It is a two-way street. While the heavy stones go up, the empties must come down. Gangs of men drag empty sledges down the outer edge of the ramp, dancing a dangerous jig to avoid the upward-bound teams. Water carriers run up and down, agile as goats, bringing precious hydration to the hauling teams who are sweating out their body weight in water every few hours. Inspectors measure the angle of the slope, constantly using a frame levels and plumb bobs, ensuring the serpent does not become too steep. If the angle deviates by even a degree, the physics fail and the stone stops moving. The construction of the ramp itself is a constant race against the pyramid. Gangs of ramp builders are always one step ahead of the haulers, raising the road, packing the mud, laying the timbers. They are building a bridge to nowhere, a structure destined to be destroyed the moment the capstone is placed. This is the tragic irony of the ramp. It is the largest structure on Earth, save for the pyramid itself, and yet it is ephemeral. It is a tool to be discarded. We are now halfway up. The pyramid is a stump, a flat-topped mesa of stone. The spiral serpent coils around it, a dusty, brown ribbon strangling the white, geometric perfection of the monument. It is ugly, functional, and terrifying. It is the umbilical cord that feeds the tomb, pumping stone from the ground to the sky. And on this narrow, precarious ledge, suspended between the desert and the sun, the paid hell reaches its crescendo. Here, a man does not just work for his ration. He gambles his life with every step. The spiral ramp provides the path, but it does not provide the power. The stone must be dragged, and the greatest enemy of the drag is friction. Friction is the invisible hand that wants to stop the world from moving. It is the gritty resistance between the wooden runners of the sledge and the mud and timber surface of the ramp. On a 7-degree incline with a 2-ton block, friction is not just a nuisance. It is a wall. If it is not managed, the stone will not move no matter how many men pull. The science of building a pyramid is, therefore, in large part, the science of lubrication. We focus on a single hauling gang, a za, captured in the middle of a pull halfway up the structure. They are not moving. They are poised, a tableau of potential energy waiting to be unleashed. There are 20 men in this team, arranged in pairs along 2 thick ropes of twisted palm fiber attached to the front of the sledge. Their bodies are lean, corded with muscle that stands out under a sheen of sweat and dust. They are leaning forward, their weight thrown against the ropes, their feet dug into the transverse timbers of the ramp for traction. Their faces are masks of concentration, teeth gritted, breath held. At the front of the sledge stands the most important man in the gang, the water pourer. He is not a hauler. His job requires precision, not brute strength. He holds a ceramic jar filled with a mixture of water and a fatty, oily substance, perhaps animal tallow or gypsum slurry. His eyes are fixed on the space immediately in front of the sledge runners. If he pours too little, the friction will be too high, and the haulers will burn their energy fighting the ramp instead of gravity. If he pours too much, the ramp turns to slime, and the haulers will lose their footing, leading to catastrophic slips. He must pour just enough to create a slick, viscous film that allows the heavy wood to glide. He is the mechanic of the movement. The signal is given by the chanter, a man who stands to the side, keeping the rhythm. He claps his hands sharply. Clap. The men exhale in a collective grunt, "Huh," and drive their legs downward. The ropes snap taut, vibrating with tension. For a second, nothing happens. The static friction holds the stone fast. The men strain, their tendons standing out like cables, their feet slipping slightly in the grit. It is a battle of wills, muscle versus physics. Then, with a groan of wood against earth, the inertia breaks. The stone lurches forward inches at a time. Ha! 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 The chant becomes the engine. They move in perfect unison, a single organism with 40 legs. If one man pulls out of sync, the efficiency of the entire gang drops, and the stone slows. They are bound together by the rope and the rhythm. We see the physical toll of this movement. The ropes bite deep into their shoulders, leaving calluses that have turned into permanent, leathery pads of skin. Their hands are raw, despite the calluses, from gripping the fiber. The heat on the ramp is intense, trapped between the rising pyramid wall and the open desert air. The sweat pours off them, washing channels through the dust on their skin. The water carriers run alongside, offering ladles of warm, gritty Nile water to mouths that are parched dry within minutes of the last drink. To stop hydration is to die of heat stroke. The progress is agonizingly slow. A good day might see a stone moved only a few hundred meters up the spiral. The work is monotonous, repetitive, and physically devastating. Yet, there is a strange camaraderie here. These men trust each other with their lives. If the man behind you slips, you must hold the weight until he recovers. If the man in front of you stumbles, you must not trample him. They share the same barracks, the same food, and the same pain. They are bound by a shared suffering that outsiders cannot understand. When the sledge reaches a section where the ramp is particularly rough or steep, the lever men step in. They carry long, stout wooden poles. They jam them under the rear of the sledge and, on the chanter's signal, throw their weight onto them, prying the stone upward and forward, giving the haulers that extra ounce of mechanical advantage needed to overcome a sticking point. It is a violent, jerky movement, a sharp contrast to the smooth glide they aim for. Friction is not just beneath the sledge, it is also within the ropes. The fibers rub against each other, creating internal heat that can fray and snap a rope under tension. A snapping rope is a whip that can take a man's head off. The rope makers are constantly inspecting the lines, looking for weak spots, applying animal fat to the fibers to keep them supple and reduce internal friction. Every detail, from the consistency of the mud on the ramp to the twist of the rope, is a matter of life and death. As the sun climbs higher, the shadows shorten, and the ramp becomes a blinding white ribbon of pain. The men do not look up at the summit, which seems impossibly distant. They look at the mud just in front of their sandals. They listen to the chant. They feel the burn in their thighs and the bite of the rope. They are in the paid hell, and the only way out is through. They pull not for glory but because the alternative stopping is unthinkable. We leave the blinding white glare of the limestone ramp and step into the abyss. The transition is violent to the senses. One moment, the world is awash of searing light and wind. The next, it is extinguished. We are entering the internal anatomy of the beast, the complex system of shafts, corridors, and chambers that form the soul of the pyramid. While thousands of men haul stone on the outside, a select few, the royal masons, work here, in the bowels of the man-made mountain. They are the masters of the red stone, the granite, and they inhabit a world of perpetual night. The air inside is different. It is not the fresh, hot air of the desert. It is cool, heavy, and recycled. It smells of ancient dust, unwashed bodies, and the distinct, acrid scent of burning oil. There are no windows here. The only light comes from simple ceramic lamps filled with castor oil and floating wicks. To reduce the smoke that would otherwise choke them in these confined spaces, the workers add salt to the oil, a trick passed down through generations. These lamps cast a flickering, yellow glow that makes the shadows dance on the walls, creating the illusion that the stone itself is breathing. We find ourselves in the Grand Gallery, the architectural spinal cord of the pyramid. It is a soaring, cathedral-like hall rising nearly 9 meters into the darkness above. The walls are corbelled, each layer of stone projecting slightly inward over the one below, narrowing as it rises until the ceiling is just a narrow slit. This is not merely aesthetic. It is a structural necessity designed to bear the crushing weight of the masonry above. The men working here are silent. Sound travels strangely in these acoustic chambers. A dropped chisel sounds like a thunderclap, echoing endlessly up and down the gallery. Therefore, they work with a hushed reverence, communicating with hand signals and whispers. The task here is precision, not volume. Outside, a gap of a few centimeters between stones is acceptable. Inside, the tolerance is measured in fractions of a millimeter. We watch a master mason fitting a block of pink granite brought all the way from Aswan. This stone is harder than steel to their copper tools. To shape it, they cannot use chisels. They must use pounders, balls of dollar. The psychological weight of this place is crushing. These men know exactly where they are. They are buried alive. Above their heads, millions of tons of limestone are pressing down, held back only by the laws of physics and the skill of their architects. The fear of a collapse is a constant, low-level hum in the back of their minds. A tremor, a shift in the foundation, a crack in a lintel. Any of these could turn this gallery into their tomb in an instant. This claustrophobia breeds a specific kind of intensity. There is no room for error, no room for laziness. We ascend the grand gallery to the most sacred and difficult part of the construction, the king's chamber. Here, the engineering reaches its zenith. The roof of this chamber must support the entire peak of the pyramid. To prevent the ceiling from cracking under the impossible load, the architects have devised a series of relieving chambers, 5 small, empty voids stacked above the king's chamber like layers of a cake. These voids are designed to divert the downward pressure of the masonry outward, away from the burial vault. We see a team of workers maneuvering one of the massive granite beams that will form the roof of the first relieving chamber. This beam weighs 50 tons. Moving it inside this confined space, where there is no room for large levers or teams of oxen, is a nightmare of logistics. They use a system of wooden rollers and a lubricant made of milk and clay. They do not pull, they inch. Every movement is calculated. If the beam slips, it will crush everyone in the room. The air is thick with the smell of fear and exertion. The men are naked, their skin slick with sweat that cannot evaporate in the humid, stagnant air. They are like greased gears in a machine, sliding against the red granite. In the center of the unfinished chamber sits the sarcophagus. It was placed here early in the construction because it is too large to fit through the narrow corridors. It is a single block of chocolate-colored granite, hollowed out with copper tube drills and abrasive sand. The drilling process alone took years. We can see the circular marks of the drills on the inside, the scars of the abrasive. It sits alone, empty, waiting for the God King. It is the heart of the heart, the reason for all this suffering. For the workers in the deep chambers, the sun is a memory. They emerge only at shift changes, blinking and blinded by the light of Ra, coughing up the black soot of the lamps. Their skin is pale compared to the blackened hides of the external haulers. They suffer from a different set of ailments. Silicosis from the granite dust, curvature of the spine from crouching in low tunnels, and a spiritual exhaustion from working in the land of the dead before they have even died. Yet they are the proudest of all the workforce. They are the friends of Khufu. They are trusted with the king's eternity. They carve their names into the hidden spaces of the relieving chambers, graffiti that no one will see for 4,000 years. The gang of the White Crown is powerful. They scrawl in red ochre paint on the unpolished backs of the granite beams. It is a message to the future, a declaration that they were here, that they mattered, that it was their hands, not just the Pharaoh's will, that raised this mountain. As the shift ends, they descend the long, sloping darkness of the descending passage, back towards the entrance. The light at the end of the tunnel grows from a pinprick to a blinding square. They step out into the paid hell of the ramp, breathing in the hot, dusty air as if it were sweet perfume. They have survived another day in the belly of the beast. The sun reaches its zenith, standing directly overhead like the eye of Ra, judging the plateau with an unblinking, furious stare. The shadows vanish, leaving the workers exposed on the white limestone ramp, which now reflects the heat with the intensity of an open furnace. It is the hour of the fire, a time when the air itself seems to shimmer and dance. And then, a sound cuts through the rhythm of the chant, the sounding of the gong from the administrative terrace. It is the signal for Wu, the rest. The great machine grinds to a halt. The ropes go slack. The dust begins to settle, if only for a moment. It is time for the transaction that defines their existence. It is time for the wage. We witness the transformation of the site from a construction zone into a vast, open-air dining hall. The men do not retreat to the village. The distance is too great. Instead, they seek shelter in the slivers of shade provided by the pyramid itself, huddled against the cool northern faces of the unfinished blocks, or under makeshift canopies of woven reed mats erected on the ramp's edge. The silence that falls is not total, but it is a relief from the deafening industrial noise. It is filled with the murmur of 20,000 voices, the sound of an army at rest. The overseers of the granary move among the gangs. They do not carry whips. They carry clay tablets and styluses. They are followed by porters bearing heavy baskets and ceramic jars. This is the heartbeat of the Egyptian economy. There is no coin here. The currency is calorie. The currency is life. Each man receives his peso, his daily ration. It consists of 10 loaves of bread, dense, heavy loaves baked in conical molds, blackened on the outside but filled with the energy of E. We see the hierarchy of the site reflected in the food. The common haulers get the standard bread and beer, perhaps a side of onions or garlic to ward off infection. But the royal masons, the granite workers we saw in the deep chambers, receive the honor rations: cuts of roast goat, dried fish from the delta, and sweeter, stronger beer flavored with dates. This disparity is not hidden. It is a public incentive. Work harder, learn a skill, ascend the hierarchy, and you too will eat the meat of the gods. It is a system designed to bind the worker to the project through the stomach. But this chapter is not just about food. It is about the maintenance of the human machine. Near the base of the ramp, under a large linen awning, lies the House of Life, the field hospital. Here we see the SWNW, the doctors of the worksite. This is the strongest evidence against the slave myth. Slaves are disposable. These men are assets. We watch a physician setting the broken arm of a stonecutter. He uses splints made of bark and wraps the limb in clean linen dipped in honey and resin, an antiseptic mixture that prevents gangrene. In another corner, a man with a crushed foot is being treated. He is not executed or discarded. He is given a crutch and assigned light duty in the tool repair sheds. The state has invested too much grain in him to let him die. We see the evidence of this care in the skeletons found in the workers' cemetery. Bones that broke and healed, limbs that were amputated surgically, allowing the patient to live for decades longer. It is a brutal kind of care, unsentimental and pragmatic, but it is care nonetheless. The break is also a time for humanity to assert itself against the stone. In the shade of a 2-ton block, a group of haulers plays Senate, a board game scratched into the dust, using pebbles as pieces. They gamble with their bread rations, laughing, arguing, momentarily forgetting the weight of the mountain. A father shares his extra loaf with his son, who has just joined the gang. A man carves a small wooden doll for his daughter back in the village. These micro-moments of tenderness are the sparks of life in the gray monochrome of the construction site. They are not mindless drones. They are fathers, brothers, gamblers, and dreamers, trapped in a grand design that is bigger than them. But the break is short. The sun begins its descent, shifting the shadows. The gong sounds again. The game of Senate is erased with a sweep of a hand. The last dregs of beer are swallowed. The groans of stiff muscles fill the air as men rise. The paid hell reopens for business. The food they have just consumed is not for them. It belongs to the Pharaoh. It is merely on loan to their bodies to be converted into kinetic energy. The haulers take their places at the ropes. The water pourer readies his jar. The chanter clears his throat. The brief illusion of freedom ends, and the reality of the ramp returns. The sun begins to dip towards the western desert, casting long, distorted shadows that stretch from the pyramid's base like the fingers of a giant hand reaching out to claim the Nile. As the light changes, the atmosphere on the plateau shifts from the frenzy of physical exertion to a frantic, nervous tension. A ripple of silence moves through the site, starting from the causeway and spreading upward to the highest levels of the spiral ramp. It is a contagion of hush. The shouting of the boatmen dies down. The chanting of the haulers drops to a murmur. Even the ring of the copper chisels seems to hesitate. The great house is watching. We do not see Pharaoh Khufu. He is too sacred, too removed from the sweat and dust of the common man to be seen walking among the debris of construction. He remains in his palace at Memphis, across the river, or perhaps in the golden pavilion set up on the valley floor, hidden behind screens of linen and cedar. But his absence is more powerful than his presence. He is the unseen shadow that hangs over every stone, every rope, and every soul on the Giza plateau. He is not merely a king. He is a force of nature, the living incarnation of Horus, the link between the mortal world and the divine. To disappoint him is not treason. It is blasphemy. Instead of the king, we see his avatar, the man who wields the royal will like a weapon, the vizier Himiunu. He is the architect, the cousin of the king, the mastermind behind the mountain. We see him approaching not on foot, but carried in a palanquin of ebony and gold, borne on the shoulders of 12 strong Nubian guards. Himiunu is a man of immense physical bulk. His famous statue depicts him with rolls of fat across his chest and belly, a symbol of prosperity and high status in a land where most men are lean with work. But do not mistake his size for softness. His eyes are sharp, calculating, and unforgiving. He holds the royal cubit rod, the standard measure against which all other measures are judged. The inspection is a scene of terror for the overseers. Himiunu does not shout. He points. He points to a casing stone that is a fraction of a degree out of alignment. He points to a ramp section that shows signs of erosion. He points to a gang that is moving too slowly. Beside him, a retinue of scribes scribbles furiously on papyrus scrolls, recording his judgments. These notes are the law. If a Za has failed to meet its quota, their rations will be cut, or their foreman will be demoted to a water carrier. If a structural flaw is found, the architect responsible might pay with his career or his life. But the fear that drives the workers is deeper than the fear of Himiunu. It is a theological terror. The men believe, with absolute sincerity, that the pyramid is not just a tomb, but a resurrection machine. It is the launchpad for the Pharaoh's soul to ascend to the northern stars, the imperishables, and join the sun god Ra in his eternal journey. If the machine works, the cosmic order, Ma'at, is preserved. The Nile will flood, the crops will grow, and the sun will rise. But if the machine fails, if a stone is loose, if a chamber is impure, if the geometry is flawed, then the Pharaoh's soul might be trapped. Chaos, Isfit, will devour Egypt. Famine, war, and darkness will follow. This is the true genius of the system. The workers are not building for a tyrant. They are building for their own salvation. Every drop of sweat is an offering to the gods. Every painful step up the ramp is a prayer. We see this in the faces of the men as the vizier passes. They bow low, noses touching the dust, not just in submission, but in reverence. They are terrified of the power he represents, but they are also desperate to please it. They want the machine to work. They want to be part of the miracle. We witness the rituals that accompany the construction. It is not a purely secular engineering project. Priests in leopard skin robes move ahead of the stone haulers, swinging censers of burning frankincense to purify the path. They chant spells from the pyramid texts, words of power designed to lighten the stone and ward off evil spirits that might try to hinder the work. The smell of the incense mixes with the smell of sweat, creating the unique olfactory signature of Giza, the scent of the sacred and the profane entwined. As Himiunu's litter reaches the upper levels, he looks out over the landscape. He sees the workers' village, the smoke of the bakeries, the harbor choked with boats, the quarries scarring the earth. He sees the staggering logistical organism he has created. He is the brain of the beast, cool and detached. He knows the cost. He knows how many men die each week. He knows the strain on the treasury. But as he looks at the perfect, sharp angle of the pyramid's corner cutting against the blue sky, he feels no guilt. He is building something that will outlast the gods themselves. He is writing his name in stone, right next to his cousins. The unseen shadow of Khufu is also a shadow of resource allocation. We see the arrival of the royal barges at the harbor, flanked by military escorts. They are carrying not stone, but copper, precious metal from the mines of Sinai, and cedar from Byblos. These are materials worth more than the lives of the men who handle them. The theft of a single copper chisel is a capital offense. The state is bleeding itself dry to finish this monument. The pressure to finish before the king dies is immense. If Khufu dies before the pyramid is ready, the machine is broken. The urgency filters down from the vizier to the overseers, to the foreman, and finally to the man pushing the stone. Faster, the shadow whispers. The king is mortal. The stone is eternal. Hurry. As the sun touches the horizon, the vizier descends. The inspection is over. The collective breath of the plateau is released. The shadow retreats, but it never truly leaves. It remains in the aching muscles of the men, in the perfectly flat surfaces of the granite, and in the silence of the night. They are working for a ghost, a god, a man they will never meet, but who owns every beat of their hearts. The sun, Ra, finally begins his death descent into the western lands, the Duat. The sky above Giza turns a bruised purple, bleeding into deep crimson, a reflection of the blood and sweat that has soaked the plateau below. The hour of the unwearied has ended. The great gong sounds one last time, a mournful, resonant note that hangs in the cooling air. The work is done. Not finished, for the pyramid will not be finished for another decade, but done for today. The cessation of noise is sudden and startling. The deafening clangor of copper on stone, the rhythmic chanting, the cracking of whips, the creaking of wood, it all vanishes, replaced by the sigh of the wind rushing in to fill the silence. The men drop their ropes. They lower their levers. They step back from the stone faces they have been intimate with for 12 hours. Their bodies are spent. They do not walk with the military precision of the morning march. They shamble. They are ghosts of exhaustion, covered in a second skin of white limestone dust and dried mud that makes them look like the statues they are building. They descend the spiral ramp, a slow, dark stream of humanity flowing back down the mountain, leaving the realm of the sky to return to the realm of the earth. As they reach the valley floor and trudge back across the causeway toward the workers' village, many turn back to look at what they have done. In the dying light, the Great Pyramid is a terrifying silhouette. It is a jagged black triangle cutting a hole in the stars. It is silent, cold, and utterly indifferent to their pain. Yet it is magnificent. Today, perhaps 300 stones were set. To the casual eye, the structure looks no different than it did at dawn. But to these men, it has grown. They know exactly which block is theirs. They know the sweat that cemented it. They feel a strange, possessive pride. They have fed the beast, and it has grown stronger. The village awakens as the worksite sleeps. The fires are stoked again, casting long, dancing shadows against the mud brick walls. The smell of brewing beer and baking bread returns, a comforting scent of home. But tonight, the atmosphere is different. There is a heaviness. In the barracks, a man is missing, the one who slipped on the ramp in Chapter 5. His mat is empty. His possessions, a wooden comb, a linen amulet, a few copper rings, sit untouched. His friends eat in silence, pouring a libation of beer into the dust for his ka. He has paid the ultimate tax. He is now part of the mortar of the pyramid, his spirit bound to the stone forever. The paid hell cools down. The men wash the day off in the canals, the water turning milky with the limestone dust. They rub oil into their cracking skin. They tend to their blisters. They are not thinking of the future. They are not thinking of the year 2025 or of tourists marveling at their work. They are thinking only of sleep. They are thinking of the numbness that will allow them to ignore the aching in their backs until the sunrise brings the gong again. They are trapped in an endless loop of stone and sun. As the night fully takes hold, the Giza Plateau becomes a different world. The torches of the perimeter guards flicker like fireflies around the base of the colossus. The jackals begin to howl from the desert edge, the voice of Anubis calling out to the dead. The pyramid sits under the canopy of the Milky Way, a ladder waiting to be climbed. It is a machine of immortality, but not just for the pharaoh. Here lies the final irony, the ultimate truth of our story. We know the name of Khufu. We know the name of Himiunu. But we do not know the name of the water pourer who saved the gang from slipping. We do not know the name of the mason who carved the perfect corner. We do not know the name of the hauler who died today. They are the anonymous legions. They were born, they loved, they suffered, and they died to build a mountain that denies death. They believed they were servants of a god, working for a wage of bread and beer. They did not know that they were the true gods of this story. For it was not magic that raised the stones. It was not aliens. It was not the whip. It was the sheer, stubborn, beautiful endurance of the human spirit. It was the ability of flesh and blood to endure the paid hell and transmute suffering into something eternal. As the last lamp is extinguished in the barracks, the breathing of 20,000 men creates a rhythm that rivals the Nile. They sleep the sleep of the just and the used. The horizon is dark now, but tomorrow the sun will rise, the gong will sound, and the mountain will be waiting,